Hello, this is Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech number 45, looking at the Sorin versus Tibalt duel deck that is about to come out. These duel decks have been a very popular product from Wizards. They're sold through their normal collectible card game stores and also through big box stores like Target. Several of these decks have been extremely popular and very good. The Izzet versus Golgari deck, which I did a previous review on, was actually one of my favorite ones that has been put out so far. And the Demonic versus Divine deck has also been really popular, along with the Jace versus Chandra. So this deck is coming out with an MSRP at about $20. In reality, the cards in the deck are worth about $20 to $30, although I think they're going to be dropping over time and not increasing necessarily over time. We'll talk about that a little more later. So it's a decent deal to pick up, but not an amazing one. The decks themselves are of varying quality. Tibalt is a decent deck. The basic strategy behind it is very good. It's got a lot of small, quick creatures and ways to hit your opponent for a lot of damage early. I like the Sulfur Vortex in here particularly, stopping any life gain and doing damage every turn. So from a playability perspective, this is a very solid deck. The cards are a lot less exciting though, and not a lot of these cards are extremely playable in other formats. This is a very casual deck, which is why it only gets a 3 out of 5. Would have liked to have seen a few more competitive cards in this deck. The Sorin deck has a lot more in the way of competitive cards, but is a weaker deck. The deck is just a lot less focused than the Tibalt deck. This deck has a very weird high end to it, and several of the cards are on the overpriced side. So things like Butcher of Malakir, which is a favorite in EDH, and definitely going to make some fans there, keeping the price of that card down around $1 or so. It just seems really out of place in this particular deck. Most of the deck is tokens and vampires, which seems to work really well together, but it's combined with this high end of cards that makes it much more difficult to play effectively. Now, this is just based off a few of my pre-plays over on Tapped Out, and I'll be cracking one of these right after it comes out and playing a few rounds of it, and I'll definitely report back on how it does. One of the things I really like about these duel decks is the opportunity for new artwork, and they've done some wonderful artwork in this particular deck. I really like Browbeat and Lightning. Also, Sorin and Tibalt both turned out really nice. Mortify is probably my second favorite card, and my first favorite is the Spectral Procession here. I really like the artwork on it. Lingering Souls also has beautiful artwork, but this was the F&M artwork, so technically it's not new artwork. This is one of my favorite parts of this deck, is all the new artwork that's in it. The new cards, oh wait, this time, unlike the Izzet versus Golgari deck, they didn't put any new cards in the deck, and this is pretty disappointing. I was hoping to see a few preview cards for Dragon's Maze in there. I think that's one of the best things they did in Izzet Golgari, and sad to see them cutting that feature. Hopefully they bring that back in future sets. The best cards in the deck are definitely things like the Hellrider, Lingering Souls, Spectral Procession, Ancient Cravings, Blightning, and Sorin. Ancient Cravings I want to point out here specifically as it's more of an EDH card, and I'm a huge EDH fan. 4 mana to draw 3 cards is really nice in a mono black or black splash deck. This works really well in EDH. I'm glad to see a reprint like this. Hellrider is also an incredibly powerful card right now in Standard, which gets us to kind of the value of the cards. The Sorin and the Hellrider are both going for about $10 currently, which is really nice. They are really what's driving the value behind this particular. Hellrider and Sorin have both started to drop significantly in price because of this deck. Hellrider was about $18 before the deck list was announced, and is down to about $10. Also, I don't see him as overly playable in Modern, and definitely not playable in Legacy. So once he rotates out, he's going to be a $3 to $5 card, maybe even less. Even though he's not being played, he really should be about $1 card at that point. Sorin, the artwork on this is really nice, unlike some of the other dual deck cards where the artwork hasn't been the best. The Sorin artwork is incredible, and I look forward to seeing it in foil, especially with the moon there in the background. I think this is going to stabilize at about about $7 or so, and it's going to bring down the price of the average Sorins from Innistrad a little bit also, making him more reasonable and easy to pick up. This is great for EDH players. I don't see Sorin seeing a lot of play currently, standard or modern, so I don't think it's going to affect either of those markets, and it's going to keep him lower. Lingering Souls has also been printed a few times here, and I don't see that hitting the price of it at all. Sulfur Vortex is the next notable card here, in that it's about a $5 card currently, and it's been a little bit tough to get a hold of for Legacy sideboards. I'm glad to see it reprinted. Ancient Cravings also has been a little tough to get a hold of for EDH, and that's another one that I'm happy to see. Tibalt here is really the big loser, or the thing that's missing in the value side. Tibalt is likely to become the first quarter Planeswalker. He is very difficult to sell at this point. I see lots of stores with stacks of him, and unless somebody comes up with something really innovative, this is only going to drive down the price of someone who's already really low in price. There was one other thing that did bother me a little bit about this deck. The decks are weak when it comes to modern and legacy staples. This was an opportunity to print a modern or a legacy, or preferably one of each card, that is extremely useful and difficult for people to get in those formats. With regards to Mortify, they simply printed the worst version of Vindicate. I don't know any competitive decks that actually play Mortify. I was very disappointed to see it, even though it has wonderful new artwork on it. The artwork almost looks like it could have been artwork for Vindicate, which is what I would have loved to have seen in this spot. Also, the biggest problem with getting into Legacy and Modern is the price of lands. I would have loved to have seen a nice fetch or even a filter land at this point come out, preferably the Marsh Flats, because the value of Marsh Flats has nearly tripled because of Modern Season, and is putting some serious pressure on the ability for people to play that particular format. Instead, they put Tainted Field in here, which is a barely playable dual land. I do want to point out that both Spectral Procession and Sulfur Vortex are in this deck, which are great modern and legacy cards, but they're played in so few decks and so small that they really don't have the impact that you need. If we look back at the Izzet deck, that had some amazing cards in it. It really opened up Life from the Loam for innovation, and we've seen several decks use Life from the Loam because of that. Also, Eternal Witness was in there. It just hits on really popular cards and makes them more accessible, and that's what a deck like this dual deck should do. Now let's move on to the matchup between the two individual decks. The Tibalt deck, I actually think, is the stronger of the two decks. It really has an easier to play strategy. The mana curve is much better done. In my short playtesting on it, I believe the Tibalt deck is going to crush the Sorin deck, but I'll get back to you after I've had some actual games with cards on it. Both of these decks, though, can easily be improved into some very competitive, very fun, powerful decks also. In the Sorin deck, I would definitely cut out the higher end of the curve or some of the inefficient cards that are in there, add in a little more card draw, maybe some Smallpox or Vindicate, depending on the particular environment you're in. Also, add in a few of Sorin's friends, some Lilianas or Elspeths. It would look great. The token aspect to it could also do really well with a Wrath effect or two, especially if you increase the number of Planeswalkers. The Tibalt deck, I would once again lower the curve on it and increase the effectiveness of the cards. Lightning Bolts, Goblin Guides, more Bump in the Nights, maybe even some Dark Confidants if you want to go for the expensive route. But this deck is a bit on the more honed side, and it could get much better by focusing it. I like the deck overall from the design. It just needed a little bit of help with the cards, and that's definitely what I would do to improve it. Thanks. This has been Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech, reviewing the new Sorin versus Tibalt dual deck due out later this week.
I'm here to crush you, Tibalt.
Hey, don't do that.
I'm going to chop you into little pieces.
Hey, leave me alone, leave me alone. Poor Tibalt.